Do you have a receipt? What would you do if someone walked up to you in public and decided you didn't belong? Would you explain yourself, argue, or stay seated and let silence do the work? She didn't raise her voice, but the entire cafe heard her. The gentle jingle of the cafe door greeted Layla Morrison as she stepped into the coffee mill, a small, charming spot nestled in the heart of Asheville, North Carolina. Warm cinnamon and freshly ground coffee welcomed her like old friends, promising exactly what she needed, a quiet refuge. Layla, a respected college professor known for her thoughtful lectures and patient wisdom, felt the weight of exhaustion from countless hours spent grading essays and mentoring students. Today, she dressed simply, a cozy cardigan draped over a loose blouse, paired with well-worn jeans. Nothing about her quiet, modest appearance hinted at her authority or prestige, and that suited her perfectly. Choosing her familiar corner table by the window, Layla settled in, savoring the sunlight gently warming her skin. She unpacked her papers carefully, each essay reflecting not just student effort but dreams waiting patiently for guidance. Lost briefly in thought, her tranquility was shattered by the abrupt scrape of approaching footsteps. Nathan, an employee she'd vaguely noticed before, stood above her, arms crossed tightly, a clipboard gripped in his hands. His expression lacked warmth, instead carrying a skeptical glare she recognized all too well. "Excuse me," Nathan said tersely, his voice just loud enough to draw glances from nearby tables. "This space is reserved for paying customers." Layla paused, pen suspended mid-air, confusion clouding her features. "I am a paying customer," she gently replied, meeting his eyes with practiced calm. "I've been coming here regularly for months." Nathan's eyes flickered, narrowing slightly. "Well, I haven't seen you order anything today. You can't just sit here taking up space." A quiet tension thickened around them, and Layla felt a familiar discomfort crawl up her spine, a discomfort rooted deeply in memories of quiet prejudice and hushed confrontations. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself against the assumptions behind his words. She glanced briefly at the surrounding patrons, aware of curious eyes discreetly observing the interaction, yet choosing silence. Turning back to Nathan, she spoke with unwavering dignity, "And you've assumed I wouldn't order simply because I sat down." Layla Morrison didn't carry herself like someone who needed to prove anything. Her presence was soft, deliberate, like the echo of a warm thought. Students adored her for her clarity and grace in the classroom. Colleagues leaned on her during chaos, knowing she would always respond with level-headed strength. But here, in a public cafe where no one knew her credentials or her classroom presence, Layla simply looked like a tired woman hoping for a moment of peace. She wore what felt good, a pale gray cardigan, gently fraying at the cuffs, and soft-soled shoes that made no sound when she moved. Her hair was pulled back into a loose bun that had started to slip free, and her canvas tote bag carried more papers than she'd ever admit aloud. There was nothing about her that said, authority. And maybe that was the point. When Nathan confronted her, Layla's first instinct wasn't anger, it was restraint. Her mind, trained from decades of being second-guessed in board meetings and questioned in faculty lounges, quietly flipped through options. She smiled lightly, gesturing toward her satchel. "I was just settling in. I plan to order in a minute." But Nathan didn't budge. Layla glanced around the cafe, wondering if anyone, might interject, but the other patrons kept their heads down, pretending to focus on their laptops and mugs, even as their ears perked up. It wasn't the first time Layla had been approached like this, assumed to be out of place. But something about today hit different. Maybe it was the fatigue, or the fact that she'd just given a lecture on unconscious bias the day before. Maybe it was just the growing ache of always needing to stay polite when others didn't. She breathed in, steadied herself, and stayed seated. Nathan's voice was still ringing in her ears when the memories started to creep in, quiet, uninvited. It was never about shouting, never name-calling, just moments, subtle, sharp, like when she was mistaken for the assistant instead of the keynote speaker at a conference, or when the department head asked her if she was shadowing a tenured professor, when she already was one. Or the time a store clerk followed her down the aisles of a boutique she'd been shopping at for years, asking softly, "Can I help you with something?" But not like he meant it. Those moments had always stung, but she'd smiled through them. Smiled so much, in fact, that sometimes even she started to wonder if they'd really happened the way she remembered. That was the trick, wasn't it? They always made you question your own experience. But not today. As Nathan hovered, still waiting for her to shrink or move or apologize, Layla felt something shift deep in her chest. Not anger, not fear, something quieter, older. Resolve. She had taught her students about this, about how bias doesn't always scream, it whispers. It dresses up as policy or concern or community. And yet it always lands the same way, in your lap, asking you to prove you belong in a space you've already earned. Layla looked up slowly, meeting Nathan's gaze again. Her voice, when it came, was calm, grounded. "I said I'm a regular here." But what she meant was, I've been here before, in this moment, in this tension, and I won't be made small again, not this time. Nathan's tone sharpened. His feet planted wider apart, arms now crossed in a stiff wall of authority. He wasn't just asking questions anymore, he was performing them. "I need to see a receipt," he said, louder this time. "If you haven't ordered anything, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Layla didn't move. A young man at the bar glanced up from his laptop. A woman with a stroller shifted slightly in her seat, pretending not to listen. The air around them had changed. It was the kind of shift that didn't need words, just awareness. Layla stayed seated, her pen resting across a half-marked essay. She looked up slowly, meeting Nathan's eyes without flinching. "I said I was going to order," she repeated, voice low even. "And I've been coming here for over a year." Nathan's jaw tensed. "Well, I haven't seen you, and we've had people trying to use the space without buying anything. I'm just doing my job." She tilted her head. "Your job is to assume I don't belong." "That's not what I said." "No," she replied, "but it's what you did." For a moment Nathan faltered, just a blink, a crack in the wall. "You came over to me," she continued, still calm but unmistakably firm, without checking the register, without asking a question. "You walked over certain of something you didn't bother to verify." "I treat everyone the same," he said quickly, defensively. Layla raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" Silence. The question hung there, heavier than any accusation. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. Nathan stepped back slightly, looking toward the counter, toward his manager, who had just emerged from the back and was now quietly watching. Other customers looked up too, no longer pretending to ignore it. The weight had shifted. Layla folded her hands atop her stack of papers. "You want to enforce rules, fine. But next time start with fairness, not assumptions." The woman with the stroller gave a faint nod. A man near the window murmured something under his breath. Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came. And just like that, the performance lost its power. For a long moment, no one spoke. The café wasn't loud to begin with, but now it felt suspended, like the air itself had gone still. Layla remained seated, posture relaxed, eyes steady. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't stood. But somehow the room had rearranged around her. Across the floor, subtle shifts were happening. A regular near the back, a retiree who always ordered chamomile tea, lowered his newspaper. The woman with the stroller gently pushed it back and forth, her gaze lingering in quiet solidarity. Even the barista, who had pretended to stay busy steaming milk, now looked squarely at Nathan with furrowed brows. No one needed to say anything. They'd seen enough. Nathan felt it too. the unraveling, the way the room no longer moved with him. His voice, once sharp and sure, had vanished into the corner. What had started as a display of authority now clung awkwardly to silence. He shifted his stance, cleared his throat. Layla didn't move. Her calm had done something his volume couldn't. It made people listen. Not just to her, but to themselves, to their instincts, to the quiet, familiar discomfort that comes when witnessing something wrong but not knowing if it's your place to say so. Now they knew. The manager stepped closer from behind the counter, lips pressed in a line. Nathan took a small step back, not much, but enough. His authority had cracked and everyone could see it. Without saying a word, Layla had drawn the line, and the room had chosen where it stood. Nathan didn't say another word. He glanced at the manager, then turned and disappeared into the back, the swing of the kitchen door the only sound breaking the cafe's uneasy quiet. It took a moment before things began to breathe again. The first to move was the woman with the stroller. She approached slowly, gently rocking her baby, and paused at Layla's table. Her voice was soft but certain. "I just wanted to say, thank you. You handled that with so much grace. I don't think I could have stayed that calm." Layla offered a tired but sincere smile. "Sometimes calm is all you have left." The woman nodded, lingering for a beat, then walked back to her seat. Next came the retiree from the back. He didn't say much, just a quiet "good for you" as he passed, placing his newspaper down on a nearby table like a quiet show of respect. Then a student, someone Layla vaguely recognized from campus, stopped by with wide eyes and a trembling cup of coffee. "I didn't know what to say earlier," she said nervously, "but I saw what happened. You didn't flinch." It meant something. Layla's smile softened. "Thank you. That means something too." One by one, people made their presence known, not with applause or grand gestures, but with honest words and small affirmations. Words that said, "We saw. We understood. We respect you." The barista, young and visibly uneasy from earlier, brought over a drink Layla's usual order. He didn't charge her, just set it down gently. "On the house," he murmured, "for how you carried yourself." Layla looked at the cup, then back up at him. "Thank you." These weren't performative apologies. They weren't trying to fix what Nathan had broken. But in their own quiet way, they were helping lay something new in its place: recognition, connection. Layla didn't need to be told she'd done the right thing. She didn't even need the acknowledgement. But the quiet circle of humanity that formed around her in the aftermath reminded her of something deeper. That strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sits still, keeps its voice low, and lets the world catch up. By the next morning, the story had already made its quiet rounds. It wasn't trending on social media or being shared in dramatic headlines. But in the corners of the coffee mill, in whispers between regulars and quiet exchanges over pastries, it lived. Carried not by volume, but by the weight of what people had seen. "I heard what happened with that new guy," murmured one man to his friend while waiting for his Americano. "She never even raised her voice, did she?" "Nope," the friend replied. "Didn't need to." Baristas spoke in hushed tones behind the counter. Patrons who hadn't been there the day before now watched Layla with more than recognition. They watched with reflection. Not pity, not spectacle, just a kind of quiet, settled respect. Late that afternoon, as Layla gathered her things, a little boy wandered up to her table. Maybe 7 or 8, all skinny limbs and curiosity. "Are you the lady from yesterday?" he asked. Layla looked down, smiling gently. "I might be. My mom said someone was mean to you, but you stayed nice." She leaned in a bit. "Sometimes people think they know who someone is just by looking at them, but they don't always see the whole story." The boy frowned, thoughtful. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," she agreed. "That's why it's important to be kind, to ask, not assume." He nodded slowly, the idea settling into his young mind like a seed. Okay, I'll remember. And then he was gone, bounding back to his mother, who gave Layla a grateful smile. That moment stayed with her, more than the stares, more than the soft apologies. Because that boy wouldn't carry the memory of conflict. He'd carry the lesson. And in places like this café, where the walls weren't plastered with statements about inclusion or equity, but where small eyes watched and learned, Layla knew something had shifted. Not all revolutions are loud. Some begin at a corner table with a coffee cup, a quiet voice, and a moment that makes people stop and think, even if they never say a word. 3 days passed before Layla finally opened the envelope. It had arrived without fanfare, no return address, just her name in careful handwriting and a café napkin tucked gently inside. Folded around the napkin was a small note, printed neatly in blue ink. I didn't know how to say it in person, but I saw what you did. My daughter saw too. You showed her what strength looks like without shouting, what it means to hold your ground with grace. Thank you for showing her and me that silence can be powerful when it comes from truth. Apparent Layla sat for a long time with that note in her lap. The sunlight streamed across her kitchen table, catching the edge of her mug and the ink of her grading pen forgotten for the moment. She had received other messages too. An email from a student. I was in the cafe. I saw it. You didn't know I was there, but I'll never forget how you handled it. A text from the barista. I should have stepped in sooner. I won't stay quiet next time. And even a short voicemail from a fellow professor who'd heard through a mutual friend. You made us all proud. But it was the napkin that stuck with her, something so small, so quiet, and yet it echoed. Layla hadn't set out to teach a lesson that day. She didn't want to be a symbol or a story passed from table to table. She just wanted her coffee, her peace, her space. The right to sit down and not be questioned for existing in it. But somehow, without raising her voice, she had drawn a line, clear, steady, human. And others had noticed. Not because she demanded attention, because she didn't need to. In a world where noise often drowns out substance, Layla reminded people that dignity doesn't perform. It stands. It breathes. It remains. And sometimes it changes more than anyone expects, just by staying exactly where it belongs. Layla's story isn't just about a moment in a cafe. It's about all the spaces we find ourselves in, where we're forced to prove what we already know, that we belong. Her calm wasn't weakness. It was power. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. If you've ever been questioned, underestimated, or made to feel small in a place you had every right to be, let this be your reminder. You owe no one proof of your worth. And if this story made you pause, reflect, or feel seen, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to hear more real stories of quiet strength, everyday courage, and the dignity that stands tall without ever raising its voice. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stay seated and let the world adjust.